Imagine this. You're a renowned detective, faced with a confession that's impossible, admitting guilt while proving innocence in the same breath. That's the riddle Hercule Poirot must unravel in the confession paradox. Chapter 1. The Mysterious Invitation. Picture this, folks. It's a foggy evening in London, the kind where the street lamps cast eerie shadows on the cobblestones and the air smells of rain and mystery. Our hero, the legendary Belgian detective Hercule Poirot, is settling into his cozy apartment at Whitehaven Mansions. He's just finished a perfect cup of tisane, his little gray cells humming with satisfaction after solving a minor theft at a nearby hotel. But as he adjusts his impeccable mustache in the mirror, there's a sharp knock at the door. His valet George announces a visitor, a disheveled young man named Arthur Hastings. No, wait, that's his old friend. But in this tale, someone new. A frantic solicitor named Mr. Reginald Thorpe. Thorpe bursts in, his face pale as a ghost, clutching a crumpled envelope. "Monsieur Poirot," he gasps, "you must help me. I've received this anonymous letter, and it speaks of a confession that could destroy lives, including mine." Poirot, ever the picture of calm, gestures for Thorpe to sit and pours him a steadying brandy. As Thorpe explains, the letter arrived that morning at his office in Chancery Lane. It's written in elegant script, claiming knowledge of a long-buried secret from Thorpe's past, a supposed involvement in a financial scandal years ago. The twist. The letter demands Thorpe confess publicly to a crime he swears he didn't commit, or else face exposure of something even worse. "It's a paradox, sir," Thorpe stammers. "If I confess to appease them, I ruin my reputation with a lie. If I don't, they reveal truths that aren't true." Poirot's eyes sparkle with intrigue as he examines the letter under his magnifying glass. The paper is fine quality, watermark from a rare mill in France, and the ink has a faint scent of lavender, clues already forming in his methodical mind. He questions Thorpe gently. "Tell me, mon ami, about this scandal. What exactly do they accuse you of?" Thorpe recounts a story from a decade prior, when he was a junior partner in a firm handling estates. A client's fortune vanished, fingers pointed at embezzlement, but the case was dropped for lack of evidence. Thorpe insists he was innocent, but rumors lingered. Now, this letter promises a confession document that allegedly proves his guilt. Yet paradoxically, it hints that the confession itself is fabricated to trap him, to make this relatable. Think about those times you've been caught in a white lie that snowballs, maybe exaggerating a story to a friend, only for it to come back and bite you. That's the essence here. A confession that's both true and false, forcing Thorpe into a logical knot. Poirot, drawing on his vast experience, shares a quick tip for viewers. In real life, when faced with blackmail, document everything, its places, and words exchanged. It could save you, just like Poirot's notes will hear. He decides to take the case, sensing deeper layers. It's a little gray cells. "They tell me this is no ordinary threat," he declares. "We shall meet the sender at the appointed time tomorrow night at the old clock tower." As Thorpe leaves, somewhat reassured, Poirot paces the room, piecing together initial thoughts. Why lavender ink? Why a French watermark? Could the blackmailer be from across the channel? This sets the stage for a puzzle that twists logic itself. And just like that, we're off to the races. Stick around for Chapter 2, where Poirot heads to the rendezvous and uncovers the first shocking clue. Chapter 2. The clock tower rendezvous. The night air is thick with tension as Hercule Poirot steps out of his chauffeured car, his polished shoes clicking on the damp cobblestones near the old clock tower in Southwark. The fog has thickened since yesterday, wrapping the tower's looming silhouette in a ghostly shroud. The clock strikes 9, its chimes echoing like a warning. Poirot adjusts his overcoat, his sharp eyes scanning the shadows. The anonymous letter instructed Mr. Thorpe to meet the blackmailer here alone, but Poirot insisted on coming instead, arguing that his presence would unsettle the mysterious figure pulling the strings. Thorpe, still shaken, waits nervously at a nearby pub, under strict orders to stay put. Poirot positions himself near the tower's base, where a flickering gas lamp casts a dim glow. He clutches his silver-tipped cane, not for support, but as a potential weapon. The letter mentioned, A confession document would be revealed tonight, and Poirot's mind is already racing with possibilities. Is it a forged ledger? A fabricated witness statement? The paradox of a confession that proves guilt and innocence simultaneously fascinates him. As he waits, a figure emerges from the mist, a tall woman in a dark cloak, her face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. She moves with purpose, stopping just outside the lamp's reach. "Monsieur Poirot," she says, her voice low and accented, perhaps Eastern European. "You are not Thorpe. Why do you meddle?" Poirot bows slightly, unruffled. "Madame, I am here to ensure justice. You have a document, Nan? Let us see it." The woman hesitates, then slides a sealed envelope from her cloak, tossing it to the ground near his feet. "Read it," she says. "But know this. The truth it holds will unravel more than you expect." Before Poirot can respond, she vanishes into the fog, her footsteps fading as quickly as they came. Retrieves the envelope, noting its weight and the same lavender-scented ink from the first letter. Inside, he finds a single Sheeta-typed confession, supposedly signed by Thorpe, detailing how he siphoned funds from the estate 10 years ago. But oddly, the document includes precise dates and bank transactions that Poirot knows from Thorpe's earlier account never existed. Intrigued, Poirot slips the document into his pocket and heads to the pub to meet Thorpe. The solicitor's face drains of color as he reads the confession. "This is nonsense," he cries. "These transactions, I was in Scotland when they supposedly happened." Poirot nods, his mind cataloging this contradiction. The confession is too perfect, too detailed, yet riddled with verifiable errors. It's as if the blackmailer wants it to be disproved. But why? Poirot decides to investigate the paper's origin next. Suspecting the French watermark holds a clue, he sends Thorpe home with a warning to speak to no one, then hails a cab to his office. Determined to trace the mysterious woman, as the cab rattles through London streets, Poirot's thoughts turn to the accent he heard. Polish, perhaps? Or Czech? The plot thickens, and the paradox deepens. Why craft a confession so easily debunked? The answer lies somewhere in the shadows of this foggy city, and Poirot is determined to find it. Stay tuned for Chapter 3, where our detective follows the trail to a surprising new suspect. Chapter 3. The Trail to the French Connection. Hercule Poirot awakens early the next morning in his meticulously organized apartment. The first rays of sunlight filtering through the lace curtains as he sips his café au lait, his mind ever active, replays the events of the previous night, the enigmatic woman at the clock tower, her accented voice lingering like an unsolved cipher. He examines the confession document again, under the bright light of his desk lamp, noting the inconsistencies that scream of deliberate fabrication. The dates listed for the alleged embezzlement aligned with Thorpe's alibi in Scotland, easily verifiable through old travel records. Yet the document's language is polished, almost literary, as if penned by someone with a flair for drama rather than deceit. Poirot decides the French watermark is the key. It's from a boutique paper mill in Lyon, not commonly available in England. He telephones his contacts at Scotland Yard, requesting discreet inquiries into recent imports of such paper, but they yield nothing immediate. Undeterred, he dresses in his finest suit, complete with a fresh carnation in his lapel, and sets out for the British Library, where he knows rare paper experts might shed light. Upon arrival, the library's grand reading room buzzes with scholars, hunched over ancient tomes, but Poirot navigates to the special collections desk with purposeful strides. He presents a sample of the watermark to Dr. Evelyn Hargrove, a bespectacled archivist with a reputation for encyclopedic knowledge of ephemera. "Ah, Monsieur Poirot," she says, adjusting her glasses as she inspects the fragment. "This is from Maison Duval in Lyon, produced exclusively for high-end stationery shops in Paris and a few select exporters. Last shipment to London was 3 months ago, to a dealer in Mayfair named Etienne Laurent." Poirot's eyes narrow. Laurent sounds French, perhaps a link to the lavender ink, which he recalls as a signature of certain Parisian perfumers. Thanking Dr. Hargrove, he hails a cab to Mayfair. the bustling streets alive with shoppers and vendors as the morning progresses into a crisp afternoon. The stationery shop, tucked between a jeweler and a tailor, exudes old-world elegance with its gilded sign and window displays of quills and inks. Inside, the air is scented with wax and parchment. Etienne Laurent, a wiry man in his 50s, with a neatly trimmed beard and a faint Gallic accent, greets Poirot warily. "Bonjour, monsieur. How may I assist?" Poirot produces the envelope, watching Laurent's reaction closely. Shopkeeper's face tightens. "Ever so slightly, Attell," Poirot notes. Under gentle but persistent questioning, Laurent admits selling a batch of the lion paper to a regular customer, a woman named Nadia Kovacs, who claimed to be a novelist researching historical documents. She paid in cash, left no address, but mentioned residing near Hampstead Heath. Kovacs, the name resonates with the Eastern European accent from the clock tower. Could she be the same woman? Laurent describes her, tall, dark-haired, with striking green eyes and a preference for lavender-scented ink, which he stocks specially from France. Energized by this lead, Poirot thanks Laurent and proceeds to Hampstead. The cab winding through leafy suburbs where grand houses hide behind iron gates. He stops at a local post office to inquire about Nadia Kovacs, flashing his credentials as a private investigator. The postmaster, a chatty elderly gentleman, calls forwarding mail to her at 47 Willow Lane, a modest villa rented under that name for the past 6 months. Poirot approaches the address cautiously, observing from across the street. The house appears quiet, curtains drawn, no signs of movement. He knocks, but there's no answer. Circling to the back, he spots a garden shed with a slightly ajar door. Peering inside, he finds stacks of paper identical to the watermark, along with a typewriter and bottles of lavender ink. But more intriguingly, a crumpled note in the waste bin. "Meet at the theater tonight. Confession must proceed as planned." The theater? Poirot pockets the note, his gray cells worry. Which theater? The note bears a faint imprint of a playbill for the Lyceum Theater, where a production of a mystery play is running. As evening falls, Poirot arrives at the Lyceum, the marquee lights glittering against the darkening sky. The lobby teems with patrons in evening attire, chattering excitedly. He purchases a ticket and settles into a box seat, scanning the crowd for Nadia Kovacs based on Laurent's description. Midway through the first act, he spots Hercule, cloaked, slipping into a seat near the stage. During intermission, Poirot approaches, introducing himself with his trademark politeness. "Mademoiselle Kovacs, a word if you please." She startles, her green eyes widening, but composes herself quickly. "You're mistaken, sir." Yet Poirot presses, revealing the shed's contents. Cornered, she confesses partially, "I was hired to deliver the documents, nothing more. The real architect is someone else, a man with a grudge against Thorpe from the old scandal." She refuses to name him, but hints at a connection to the original embezzlement victim's family. Before Poirot can probe further, she excuses herself and vanishes into the crowd. Returning to his apartment that night, Poirot pores over his notes, connecting dots. The French paper, the Eastern European intermediary, the paradoxical confession designed to be flawed. It's clear now that the blackmail isn't about money, but revenge, twisted into a logical trap. The grudge-bearer must be unmasked, and the theater note suggests another meeting soon. The paradox evolves: who confesses to a crime to expose another's innocence? Poirot senses the answer lies with the victim's family. Hang on for Chapter 4, where the detective delves into the past scandal and confronts a ghostly figure from Tharp's history. Chapter 4. Shadows of the past. Scandal. Hercule Poirot sits at his desk late into the night, the soft glow of his reading lamp illuminating stacks of yellowed newspaper clippings and faded legal documents, spread out before him like pieces of a shattered mosaic. He has spent the evening delving into the archives of the original embezzlement scandal from a decade ago, obtained through a discreet favor from an old acquaintance at the courts. The case centered on the estate of Lord Archibald Beaumont, a wealthy industrialist whose fortune and shipping ventures vanished overnight after his untimely death in a boating accident. Suspicion fell on the solicitors handling the will, including a young Reginald Thorpe, accused of diverting funds to offshore accounts. The investigation fizzled out when key ledgers went missing, and Beaumont's family, led by his widow Lady Beatrice and their son Victor, reluctantly dropped the pursuit amid public scrutiny. Poirot's keen eyes pick out inconsistencies in the reports, anonymous tips that led nowhere, witnesses who recanted, a lingering whisper of foul play, not from within the firm but from external forces. Victor Beaumont, now a reclusive businessman in his 40s, emerges as a potential figure of interest. His name appears in recent society pages, hinting at financial troubles despite the family's lingering wealth. Determined to confront the past head-on, Poirot arranges a meeting with Lady Beatrice at her sprawling estate in Kensington the following morning. The cab ride takes him through manicured gardens and past ornate fountains, the grandeur a stark contrast to the fog-shrouded mysteries of the city. Lady Beatrice, an elegant woman in her 60s with silver hair pinned in a chignon and dressed in somber black, receives him in the drawing room, adorned with oil paintings of seafaring ancestors. Her hands tremble slightly as she pours tea from a porcelain set, her composure cracking when Poirot mentions the old scandal. "Why dredge up such painful memories, monsieur?" she asks, her voice laced with fatigue. Poirot, ever tactful, explains. The recent blackmail targeting Thorpe, describing the paradoxical confession without revealing too much. Lady Beatrice's eyes harden at Thorpe's name. "That man ruined us," she murmurs. Victor was never the same, obsessed with proving the theft, hiring private investigators who found nothing. She admits Victor harbors a deep grudge, believing Thorpe escaped justice through clever manipulation. But she insists her son has moved on, now running a modest import business dealing in fine papers and inks from the continent. This revelation sends a jolt through Poirot. The papers and inks align too neatly with the French watermark in lavender scent. He presses gently for Victor's whereabouts, learning he resides in a townhouse in Chelsea, rarely seen in society. Thanking Lady Beatrice, Poirot departs with a polite bow, his mind racing. The connection to imports suggests Victor could be the source of the specialized stationery used in the documents. En route to Chelsea, he stops at a telegraph office to wire Inspector Japp at Scotland Yard, requesting background on Victor Beaumont's recent activities. The reply arrives swiftly. Victor has traveled to France multiple times in the past year, ostensibly for business, and has been linked to a shadowy network of forgers specializing in antique documents. Poirot arrives at the Chelsea townhouse as dusk approaches. The building's facade elegant, but showing signs of neglect, peeling paint on the doorframe, overgrown ivy climbing the walls. He knocks firmly, and after a long pause, the door creaks, open to reveal Victor himself, a gaunt man with hollow cheeks and piercing blue eyes that dart suspiciously. "Monsieur Beaumont," Poirot begins, introducing himself and stating his purpose. Victor's reaction is immediate, a flicker of recognition, followed by feigned indifference. He invites Poirot into a cluttered study filled with books on cryptography and ledgers stacked haphazardly. The air carries a faint trace of lavender, confirming Poirot's suspicions. As they sit, Victor denies any involvement in blackmail, claiming ignorance of Thorpe's current troubles. But Poirot, observing the man's twitching fingers and averted gaze, unveils the confession document, pointing out its deliberate flaws. "This is no ordinary forgery, monsieur. It is designed to be disproven, yet it torments. Why create such a paradox?" Victor laughs bitterly, admitting partial knowledge. "Thorpe was guilty, but the evidence was destroyed. I hired Nadia Kovacs, a distant relative from Prague with a talent for dramatics, to deliver messages that would force him to confess voluntarily. The document? A recreation based on what should have been? He reveals that the original embezzlement was Thorpe's doing, but covered up by a corrupt partner who fled. Victor's goal isn't money, but public admission, twisted into a logical trap where Thorpe's denial proves his cunning. Confession exposes the lie. Poirot listens intently, piecing together Victor's motive, a decade of simmering rage, fueled by his father's death and the family's near ruin. Victor shows Poirot a hidden safe containing replicas of the missing ledgers, forged with meticulous detail but altered to include Thorpe's alibis as ironic inclusions. It's a confession that confesses nothing, Victor sneers. If he signs it, he admits to a fiction. If he debunks it, he reveals his past evasions. The paradox, Poirot realizes, is a psychological weapon meant to drive Thorpe to madness. But as Victor speaks, a noise from the adjoining room alerts them a muffled thud. Poirot springs to his feet, cane in hand, and discovers Nadia Kovacs, eavesdropping behind a bookcase, her face flushed with guilt. She confesses fully now. Victor coerced her with promises of payment, but she's grown fearful of the escalating scheme. There's more, she whispers. Victor plans a final confrontation at the Beaumont family crypt tomorrow, where he'll present the ultimate confession, a document that implicates Thorpe in Lord Beaumont's death, not just the theft. Victor, overhearing, lunges to silence. But Poirot deftly trips him with his cane, subduing him until help arrives. He telephones Thorpe to warn him, then escorts Victor and Nadia to Scotland Yard for questioning. There, under interrogation, Victor breaks, revealing the crypt meeting was a trap to force Thorpe into signing under duress. The documents, he admits, are all fabrications born of obsession, the paradox a cruel game to mirror the unresolved pain of the past. As the night wears on, Poirot reflects in the yard's dimly lit corridors, the pieces falling into place, the French connections through Victor's imports, Nadia's role as intermediary, the scented ink as a signature flourish. Yet one thread remains loose, the original partner's disappearance, hinting at deeper secrets. With Victor in custody, the immediate threat lifts. But Poirot senses the paradox isn't fully resolved. Dawn breaks as Poirot returns home, the city stirring to life. He instructs George to prepare a hearty breakfast, his appetite returning with the thrill of progress. The confession paradox, once a knot of contradictions, now unravels to expose human frailty, revenge cloaked in logic. But what of the boating? Accident? Was it truly accidental, or does another layer await? The story twists onward. Keep watching for Chapter 5, where Poirot uncovers a hidden truth about Lord Beaumont's demise and faces an unexpected ally. Chapter 5. The Crypt's Hidden Truth. Morning sun barely pierces the heavy clouds hanging over London as Hercule Poirot sets out for Kensal Green Cemetery. Where the Beaumont family crypt lies nestled, fascinated by this lead, Poirot decides to investigate the crypt himself, suspecting it holds the key to unraveling the final threads of the paradox. He dons his signature Homburg hat and overcoat, the chill of the autumn air sharpening his focus. The cemetery is a sprawling maze of weathered tombstones and ivy-draped mausoleums. The Beaumont crypt, a grand structure of gray marble, its entrance flanked by stone angels with mournful expressions. Poirot's polished shoes crunch on the gravel path as he approaches, his mind replaying Victor Beaumont's chilling revelation from the previous night. A planned confrontation at this very crypt, where a fabricated document would falsely implicate Reginald Thorpe in Lord Archibald Beaumont's death. Though Victor is in custody and Nadia has confessed her role, Poirot suspects the ultimate confession document may already be hidden here. A final piece of the paradox designed to torment Thorpe with an impossible choice at the crypt's heavy iron gate. Poirot finds signs of recent disturbance, scratched earth near the entrance, and a faint smudge of lavender-scented wax on the lock, suggesting someone has been here recently. He produces a small set of lock-picking tools, a discreet skill honed from years of unconventional cases, and gains entry. Inside, the air is damp and heavy with the scent of old stone and decay. The crypt is adorned with plaques commemorating generations of Beaumonts, their names etched in faded gold. Poirot's flashlight beam dances across the walls, revealing a small alcove behind a marble urn. There, tucked into a crevice, he finds a sealed metal box, its surface engraved with the Beaumont crest. Breaking it open with careful precision, he discovers a single document, a meticulously typed letter purporting Belgian. Detective's sharp mind races. The document is a masterpiece of deceit, written in the same literary style as the previous. Confession, with dates and details that could be disproven with effort, yet crafted to provoke maximum distress. It accuses Thorpe of orchestrating Lord Beaumont's boating accident, claiming he sabotaged the vessel to cover his embezzlement tracks. But Poirot notices an anomaly. The paper is not the French watermark from Lion, but a cheaper English stock. And the ink lacks the lavender scent. This suggests a different hand at work. Someone less meticulous than Victor's usual forger. Poirot pockets the document and exits the crypt, his thoughts swirling like the mist around the tombstones. The shift in materials points to a new player, someone who knew of Victor's plan but chose to escalate it with this bolder accusation. Back at his apartment, Poirot spreads the document alongside the others, comparing them under his magnifying glass. The earlier confessions were designed to be disproven, a psychological trap to expose Thorpe's cunning. This one, however, is reckless, almost desperate, as if meant to provoke immediate action rather than prolonged torment. He telephones Inspector Japp, who confirms Victor remains in custody, swearing he prepared no such document about the boating. Accident Nadia, too, denies knowledge of it, her fear evident during questioning. Poirot's suspicions turn to the original corrupt partner from the scandal, Henry Caldwell, who vanished a decade ago after allegedly destroying the real ledgers. How could Caldwell have returned, seizing Victor's scheme to settle his own score? Determined to trace this new lead, Poirot visits the Maritime Records Office near the docks, where old logs of Lord Beaumont's boating accident are stored. The clerk, a grizzled man with a sailor's squint, retrieves dusty files detailing the incident. A yacht explosion off the Cornwall coast, ruled accidental due to a faulty fuel line. But Poirot's keen eye spots a witness statement from a fisherman, who reported seeing a second boat nearby that night, a detail dismissed at the time. The fisherman, now retired, lives in a small flat in Limehouse. Poirot takes a cab there, the city's clamor fading into the quiet of narrow streets lined with weathered brick buildings. The fisherman, Mr. Thomas Wren, is a wiry man in his 70s, his hands calloused from years at sea. Over a pot of strong tea, Wren recalls the night vividly. A sleek, unmarked boat lingered near Beaumont's yacht before speeding off just before the explosion. He never saw the occupant clearly, but noted the boat's hull bore a painted crest resembling a griffin, eerily similar to the Beaumont family emblem. This revelation sends a shiver through Poirot. Was the accident a murder, staged to look like a mishap? And if so, why resurface now with a document that risks exposure? Poirot hypothesizes Caldwell, if alive, might have orchestrated this to frame Thorpe, using Victor's existing plot as cover. Back at Scotland Yard, Poirot requests a search for Caldwell's whereabouts. Learning he was spotted in Dover 6 months ago, working under an alias in maritime trade. The Griffin crest links back to a subsidiary of Beaumont's company, suggesting Caldwell had access to family assets. Poirot visits a dockside tavern where Caldwell was last seen, blending into the crowd of sailors and merchants. A barmaid with sharp eyes recalls a man matching Caldwell's description, tall, graying, with a nervous habit of checking his watch, meeting a woman resembling Nadia weeks ago. This confirms a network, but with Caldwell as the mastermind, not Victor. As night falls, Poirot tracks Caldwell's alias to a warehouse near the Thames, its windows dark and shutters rusted. Slipping inside, he finds a makeshift office with scattered papers, including a half-finished letter in Caldwell's handwriting, outlining a plan to plant the crypt document and lure Thorpe to a public confrontation. The letter mentions a final reckoning for both Thorpe and Victor, hinting at a deeper grudge, Caldwell's belief that both men betrayed him during the original investigation, leaving him to take the fall. Before Poirot can gather more evidence, a shadow moves in the corner, a man, Caldwell himself, startled by the intrusion. He bolts, but Poirot, agile, despite his fastidious appearance, pursues him through the warehouse's maze of crates. Caldwell escapes into the foggy night, but not before dropping a key with an address etched into it, a boarding house in Whitechapel. Exhausted but undeterred, Poirot returns to his apartment, the new document and key on his desk. The paradox deepens. Victor's confessions were crafted to torment with falsehoods, but Caldwell's addition suggests a real crime hidden for years, now weaponized in a twisted game. The boating accident's truth lies within reach, and Poirot senses an unexpected ally may emerge to tip the scales. He sips his tisane, plotting his next move toward the Whitechapel address, where Caldwell's secrets await. Stay tuned for Chapter 6, where Poirot confronts Caldwell and uncovers a betrayal that changes everything. Chapter 6. The Whitechapel Betrayal. Hercule Poirot steps cautiously into the narrow, dimly lit streets of Whitechapel, the early morning mist curling around the gas lamps like ghostly fingers. The key he recovered from Caldwell's warehouse, etched with the address of a boarding house, weighs heavily in his pocket. His polished shoes tap softly on the uneven pavement as he navigates past shuttered shops and the occasional clatter of a passing cart. The boarding house at 12 Raven Lane is a dilapidated 3-story building, its faded sign creaking in the breeze. Poirot's sharp senses pick up the faint scent of damp wood and coal smoke, a stark contrast to the lavender ink of earlier clues. His mission is clear: find Henry Caldwell, the vanished partner from the Beaumont scandal, and uncover the truth behind the document implicating Reginald Thorpe in Lord Beaumont's death. The paradox of confession's truths wrapped in lies has led him here, to a place where secrets fester like the rot in the building's walls. Poirot knocks firmly on the boarding house door, his cane tucked under his arm. A weary landlady, Mrs. Agnes Polk, answers, her apron stained and her eyes suspicious. After a brief exchange during which Poirot's charm and a discreetly offered coin loosen her tongue, she confirms Caldwell, under the alias Mr. Harrow, rents a room on the top floor. She hasn't seen him since yesterday, but notes he often returns late, carrying bundles of papers. Poirot ascends the creaking staircase, each step groaning under his weight, until he reaches a locked door marked 3B. Using the key, he enters a cramped, cluttered room lit by a single flickering oil lamp. The space is a chaotic archive, stacks of forged documents, maritime charts, and newspaper clippings about the Beaumont case cover a rickety table. A photograph pinned to the wall shows a younger Caldwell with Lord Beaumont on a yacht, both smiling. Unaware of the tragedy to come, as Poirot sifts through the papers, he finds a journal in Caldwell's jagged handwriting. It details his bitterness toward Thorpe and Victor Beaumont, whom he blames for framing him as the sole culprit in the embezzlement. The journal reveals a startling truth. Caldwell was on the second boat the night of Lord Beaumont's accident, hired by a rival shipping magnate, Sir Roland Vance, to sabotage the yacht's engine. The plan was to delay Beaumont's business deal, not kill him, but the explosion was catastrophic. Caldwell fled, taking the real ledgers to protect himself, and vanished abroad. His return to London, spurred by Victor's renewed obsession with Thorpe, was a chance to exact revenge by twisting Victor's blackmail scheme into something deadlier. The crypt document, Caldwell writes, was meant to force Thorpe to confess publicly to the accident, exposing both his and Victor's roles. In the scandal's aftermath, while Caldwell remained in the shadows, Poirot's gray cells whirl as he pieces together the betrayal. Caldwell's confession document is a paradox of its own. It accuses Thorpe of a crime Caldwell himself committed. It's crafted to collapse under scrutiny, mirroring Victor's earlier tactics. But before Poirot can delve deeper, the door bursts open, and a figure lunges at him, a wiry man with graying hair and wild eyes, unmistakably Caldwell. Poirot sidesteps, his cane flashing to deflect a clumsy swing of a fireplace poker. "Monsieur Caldwell," Poirot says calmly, "violence will not untangle this web." Caldwell, panting, collapses into a chair, his bravado crumbling. Under Poirot's relentless questioning, he confesses his role in the accident, his voice breaking as he describes the guilt that's haunted him for a decade. "I didn't mean to kill him," he mutters. "It's promised. It was just business." Caldwell reveals he learned of Victor's blackmail through underworld contacts and saw an opportunity to manipulate it. He forged the crypt document using cheaper paper to avoid suspicion and enlisted Nadia to plant it, knowing her fear of Victor would keep her silent. But his plan went awry when Poirot intervened. Caldwell also mentions an unexpected ally, Sir Roland Vance, now a reclusive tycoon, living in a manor outside London. Vance, Caldwell claims, has been funding his efforts, eager to keep the accident's truth buried. Poirot, sensing a deeper conspiracy, secures Caldwell's journal, and escorts him to a waiting police van, summoned via a nearby telegraph office. At Scotland Yard, Inspector Japp takes custody. But Poirot warns that Vance's involvement suggests a larger game as evening falls. Poirot sits in a cab bound for Vance's manor in Richmond, the journal's revelations burning in his mind. The paradox evolves. Caldwell's confession implicates himself, yet shields a more powerful figure. The boating accident, once deemed accidental, now appears as a calculated murder, with Thorpe as the scapegoat. Poirot's thoughts turn to Vance, a man who thrives in shadows, pulling strings from afar. The detective adjusts his tie, preparing for a confrontation that could unravel the entire paradox. The truth about Lord Beaumont's death lies just beyond the manor's gates, guarded by a man who wields wealth like a weapon. Keep watching for Chapter 7, where Poirot faces Sir Rowland. Vance uncovers a secret that threatens to rewrite the past. Chapter 7. The manner of motives. Hercule Poirot's cab winds through the rolling hills of Richmond, the twilight casting long shadows over the countryside as he approaches the imposing gates of Sir Rowland Vance's manor. The estate looms like a fortress, its ivy-clad stone walls and towering chimneys exuding old money and older secrets. Poirot clutches Caldwell's journal, its pages a damning chronicle of betrayal and murder, pointing to Vance as the mastermind. Behind Lord Beaumont's fatal boating accident, the detective's mustache twitches as he mentally prepares for a confrontation with a man who has evaded justice for a decade. The paradox of the confessions documents that accuse yet absolve, crafted to ensnare, now hinges on Vance, whose wealth and influence could explain the elaborate scheme to frame Reginald Thorpe. Poirot steps out, his polished shoes sinking slightly into the gravel drive, and rings the bell at the gatehouse. A stern butler ushers him into the manor's grand hall, where crystal chandeliers gleam and portraits of stern-faced ancestors line the walls. Sir Rowland Vance awaits in a cavernous study, seated behind a mahogany desk cluttered with nautical charts and shipping contracts. He's a broad-shouldered man in his 60s, with a ruddy complexion and eyes that glint with guarded intelligence. "Monsieur Poirot," he says, rising with a forced smile, "to what do I owe the pleasure?" Poirot, ever the picture of courtesy, bows slightly but wastes no time. He places Caldwell's journal on the desk, open to the passage detailing Vance's role in the yacht sabotage. It speaks of a crime long buried, a death disguised as an accident, and a plan to pin it on another. Smile fades, replaced by a steely calm. He offers Poirot a brandy, which the detective declines, preferring to keep his wits razor-sharp. As they sit, Vance attempts to deflect, claiming the journal is the ravings of a disgraced man. But Poirot's relentless logic cuts through the bluster, citing the fisherman's account of the griffin-crested boat and Caldwell's confession of working under Vance's orders. Vance leans back, his fingers drumming on the desk, and begins to weave a tale of his own. He admits to hiring Caldwell years ago, not to kill Beaumont, but to disrupt his shipping empire, which threatened Vance's dominance in transatlantic trade. The sabotage, he insists, was meant to strand Beaumont's yacht, not destroy it. The explosion was a tragic error, Vance says, his voice steady, but his eyes betraying a flicker of unease. He claims ignorance of the recent blackmail scheme, suggesting Caldwell acted alone out of lingering guilt. Poirot, however, spots inconsistencies. Vance's wealth has grown since the scandal, and his company absorbed Beaumont's roots shortly after the accident. The detective presses further, mentioning the crypt documents' shift to cheaper paper, a sign of haste that points to Vance's involvement in ensuring Caldwell's plan stayed on course. "You funded his return, Nan, to keep the truth submerged?" The tension in the room thickens as Vance rises, pacing to a window overlooking the darkened gardens. He admits to limited contact with Caldwell, providing funds to settle old debts, but denies crafting the confessions. Yet Poirot notices a stack of envelopes on a side table, one bearing the faint scent of lavender Inca, careless oversight. Confronted with this, Vance's composure cracks. He reveals a deeper motive. Beaumont had discovered Vance's illicit dealings with foreign ports, threatening to expose him unless he backed out of a lucrative contract. The sabotage was a desperate move to silence him, but Vance swears he never intended murder. The confessions, he claims, were Caldwell's idea twisted to punish Thorpe, whom Vance also despised for his role in covering up the embezzlement. Thorpe was no saint, Vance snaps. He doctored the books to save himself, leaving Caldwell to take the fall. Poirot's gray cells hum as he processes this. Vance's story aligns with the paradox, a confession that implicates Thorpe. In a murder he didn't commit, yet exposes his lesser crimes. But Vance's wealth and connections suggest he's more than a bystander. Searching the study while Vance pours another drink, Poirot finds a hidden drawer containing correspondence with a French forger, confirming Vance supplied the original. Lion paper for Victor's documents before Caldwell switched to cheaper stock. This ties Vance to the scheme's early stages, a silent partner orchestrating from afar. Before Poirot can demand more, a commotion erupts outside shouts and the crunch of gravel. The butler bursts in, announcing a visitor, Lady Beatrice Beaumont. Victor's mother, her face pale with fury, Lady Beatrice, unaware of Poirot's presence, accuses Vance of manipulating her son's grief to fuel the blackmail plot. She overheard Victor's ravings in custody, mentioning Vance's name, and pieced together his role. "You destroyed my husband and now my son," she cries, clutching a letter from Vance promising Victor justice against Thorpe. Poirot seizes the moment, revealing the journal and the lavender-scented envelope. Forcing Vance to admit he encouraged Victor's obsession to deflect suspicion from himself. The confrontation ends with Vance's reluctant agreement to testify, realizing his empire is at risk. Poirot escorts Lady Beatrice to a waiting cab, promising to protect Victor from further ruin while Vance remains under watch by Japp's men. Summoned by a quick telephone call as Poirot leaves the manor, the paradox clarifies. Vance's betrayal orchestrated a chain of confessions, each a half-truth meant to obscure his own guilt. The boating accident, a murder born of greed, spawned a decade of deception, with Thorpe as the scapegoat. But one question lingers. Who else knew of Vance's role? The answer lies back in London, where an unexpected witness waits. Stick around for Chapter 8, where Poirot uncovers a final piece of the puzzle and faces a moral dilemma that tests even his resolve. Chapter 8. The witness in the shadows. The fog of London clings to the streets as Hercule Poirot's cab cuts through the night, heading toward Covent Garden. The revelations at Sir Rowland Vance's manor have tightened the knot of the confession. Paradox, with Vance exposed as the orchestrator of Lord Beaumont's death and Caldwell as his reluctant instrument. Yet Poirot's sharp instincts tell him the puzzle is incomplete. Witness lurks in the shadows. Someone who saw the truth of that fatal night a decade ago. Inspector Japp's telegram, received earlier at Scotland Yard, pointed to Margaret Finch, a former maid in the Beaumont household, spotted near the Lyceum Theatre where Nadia Kovacs vanished. The detective's polished shoes echo on the cobblestones as he arrives at her flat above a tailor's shop. The faint glow of a lamp seeping through heavy curtains. The air carries the sharp scent of thread and wax, a humble contrast to the grandeur of Vance's estate. Poirot knocks softly, mindful of the late hour, and the door creaks open to reveal Margaret Finch. A wiry woman in her 50s, with graying hair pinned tightly and eyes shadowed by years of secrets. "Monsieur Poirot," she says warily, clutching a worn shawl. "It's past midnight. What do you want?" With his usual charm, Poirot introduces himself as a private investigator, probing Lord Beaumont's death, requesting a moment of her time. Reluctantly, she invites him into a cramped parlor, cluttered with sewing baskets, spools of thread, and faded photographs on a chipped mantel. One image draws Poirot's eye, a young Margaret standing on a dock, Lord Beaumont's yacht, gleaming in the background, taken mere days before the explosion that claimed his life. The detective's mustache twitches as he senses her connection to the case runs deeper than mere employment. Seated across from her, Poirot begins gently. "Mademoiselle Finch, you served the Beaumont family during the time of the scandal. What did you see on the night Lord Beaumont sailed to his fate?" Margaret's hands tremble, betraying her nerves, but she speaks haltingly. She was a parlor maid, often overlooked, which allowed her to overhear tense exchanges between Lord Beaumont and Sir Rowland Vance in the weeks before the accident. They argued over shipping contracts, she recalls, her voice low. Vance wanted control of a new trade route to America, but the master refused to yield. The night before he sailed, I saw Vance storm out of the house, his face like thunder. Margaret admits she was sent to the Cornwall dock the next evening to deliver a logbook Beaumont forgot. There she saw Henry Caldwell, the disgraced partner, board a small boat with a griffin crest painted on its hull. His movements furtive as he checked a satchel she now suspects held sabotage tools. Poirot leans forward, his eyes gleaming with intensity. "And you kept this silent for 10 years, Perquoy?" Margaret's gaze drops to the floor, her fingers twisting the shawl, as she confesses that Vance approached her after the accident, offering a hefty sum to leave London and threatening her younger brother, a dock worker, if she spoke. Terrified, she fled to Bristol, working odd jobs until guilt and news of Victor Beaumont's arrest drew her back. She was at the Lyceum Theatre, hoping to warn Nadia Kovacs, whom she recognized from family gatherings years ago, about the dangerous game unfolding. "I knew Nadia was mixed up with Victor," she says, "but she ran before I could speak." Poirot probes further, asking about the confessions, the paradoxical documents accusing Thorpe of crimes both real and fabricated. Margaret shakes her head, claiming ignorance of any papers, but her eyes flicker toward a sewing basket when he mentions lavender ink. Sensing her hesitation, Poirot rises and casually inspects the room, his sharp eyes catching a scrap of paper. Tucked under the basket, it's the same cheap English stock as the crypt document, bearing a faint griffin watermark tied to Vance's company. "Mademoiselle," he says, holding it up. "This is no coincidence, Nan." Margaret's composure cracks, and she admits Caldwell visited her flat a week ago, asking about Thorpe's routines and muttering about a final reckoning. She refused to help, fearing Vance's reach. But Caldwell left behind a few sheets of paper, which she kept out of curiosity. Poirot examines the scrap, noting its similarity to the crypt letter accusing Thorpe of murder. Unlike Victor's earlier forgeries, this one lacks the French watermark, suggesting Caldwell's haste or a deliberate shift to deflect suspicion from Vance's supply chain. Poirot's mind races, piecing together Margaret's role as an unwitting witness drawn back into the conspiracy. Caldwell, it seems, used her knowledge of the Beaumont household to refine his final document, hoping to trap Thorpe while exposing Vance's guilt. But Margaret's fear of Vance kept her silent, making her a reluctant link in the chain. Poirot softens his tone, assuring her of protection. "You have done well to speak, mademoiselle. The truth, it will set you free." He urges her to accompany him to Scotland Yard, where Inspector Japp can ensure her safety. As they prepare to leave, Poirot notices a letter half hidden under a pile of fabric, addressed to Margaret from an unknown sender. It warns her to stay quiet, or the griffin strikes again. The handwriting matches Caldwell's journal, confirming his attempt to control her silence. At Scotland Yard, Poirot hands over the letter and paper scrap, briefing Japp on Margaret's testimony. The inspector, bleary-eyed but attentive, arranges for her to be placed in a safe house, as Vance's influence makes her a target. Poirot returns to his apartment as dawn breaks, the city stirring with the clatter of milk carts. Spreading the case's documents across his desk, he reflects on the paradox. Margaret's silence preserved the lie of Beaumont's accident, while her belated truth threatens to unravel Vance's empire. Yet the Griffin Crest warning suggests another player, someone still watching from the shadows. Could Vance have an ally? Or is Caldwell holding back one final secret? The detective sips his tisane, his gray cells humming with anticipation. Confession paradox, a tangle of half-truths and vengeance, nears its climax. But a moral dilemma looms. Stay tuned for Chapter 9, where Poirot faces a choice that could reshape justice itself. Chapter 9. The Moral Crossroads. Morning light filters weakly through the heavy drapes of Hercule Poirot's Whitehaven Mansion's apartment, casting soft patterns on the polished mahogany table where he sits, surrounded by a mosaic of clues. Caldwell's journal, Margaret Finch's griffin-creased letter, and the crypt document accusing Thorpe of murder. The confession paradox, a labyrinth of truths and lies, has drawn Poirot to a precipice. Sir Roland Vance's role in Lord Beaumont's death is clear, as is Caldwell's sabotage and Victor's vengeful forgeries. Yet Margaret's testimony, and the cryptic warning, "The Griffin strikes again," suggest a lingering threat. A hidden hand still manipulating the game. Poirot's little gray cells churn, sensing the case hinges not just on evidence, but on a moral choice. Expose Vance and risk destabilizing the lives entangled in this decade-old tragedy. Or seek a quieter justice to spare the innocent, like Lady Beatrice and Margaret, further pain. Poirot begins the day by visiting Scotland Yard, where Inspector Japp, nursing a fresh cup of tea, updates him on the suspects. Victor Beaumont remains in custody, his obsession with Thorpe's ruin laid bare. Caldwell, under guard, has grown erratic, muttering about a final player he fears more than Vance. Margaret Finch, now in a safe house, has provided a sketch of the man who delivered the Griffin-creased letter, burly figure with a scarred cheek, not Caldwell or Vance. Japp's men trace the description to a known enforcer, Liam Carver, a dock worker with ties to Vance's shipping empire. Poirot's eyes narrow. Carver could be the muscle behind the warning, a tool to keep Margaret silent. He requests Japp to locate Carver, suspecting he holds the key to the final layer of the paradox, determined to confront this new lead. Poirot heads to the London docks, where Carver was last seen unloading cargo from a Van-Soned freighter. The Thames glitters under a rare break in the clouds, but the air is thick with the temps of salt and oil. The docks teem with workers hauling crates, their shouts mingling with the cries of gulls. Poirot, in his impeccable suit, stands out like a beacon, drawing curious glances. He spots Carver near a warehouse, his scarred cheek unmistakable as he hefts a barrel with practiced ease. Approaching with his usual finesse, Poirot introduces himself, but Carver's eyes harden, and he bolts toward a maze of stacked crates. Poirot, surprisingly nimble, pursues his cane, tapping rhythmically as he weaves through the chaos.
Cornered.
Near a rusted anchor, Carver relents, his breath heavy. "I only delivered the note," he growls. "Vance paid me to scare the woman, nothing more." Under Poirot's relentless questioning, Carver reveals a deeper truth. Vance employed him to monitor Caldwell's activities, assuring the confession stayed focused on Thorpe. But Carver overheard a conversation between Vance and an unknown woman, not Nadia, discussing a final document hidden in a safe deposit box at a city bank. This document, Carver claims, it's in a confession, but a contract proving Vance's direct order for the yacht sabotage, signed by Caldwell and witnessed by a third party. Poirot's mind races. This could be the definitive evidence to convict Vance, but its existence raises a dilemma. Exposing it would ruin Vance, but also drag Lady Beatrice's family name through a public trial, further wounding Victor and Margaret, already victims of this tangled web. Poirot visits the bank, a grand marble edifice in Threadneedle Street, and uses his reputation to gain access to the safe deposit records. The box, registered under Vance's alias, requires a key Carver claims was sent to the mystery woman. Poirot's thoughts turn to the female voice Caldwell mentioned, a figure yet to emerge. He returns to Scotland Yard, where Japp has unearthed a lead. A woman named Clara Henshaw, a former secretary to Lord Beaumont, was seen dining with Vance months ago. Clara, now living quietly in Islington, had access to Beaumont's contracts and vanished after the accident, much like Caldwell. Poirot arrives at her modest cottage, its garden overgrown but tidy. Clara, a poised woman in her late 40s with sharp eyes, greets him warily, but softens at his courteous demeanor over tea. Clara reveals her role. She witnessed Vance's deal with Caldwell, signing the contract as a formality, unaware of its deadly intent. When Beaumont died, she fled, fearing Vance's retaliation. Recently, he contacted her, demanding silence about the contract, now locked in the bank vault. Clara kept the key hidden in a locket she wears, as insurance. She hands it to Poirot, her hands trembling. "I want this over," she whispers. But exposing Vance will destroy the Beaumont's legacy. Poirot, clutching the key, faces his moral crossroads: retrieve the contract and ensure justice. Risking public scandal for innocent families, or negotiate with Vance for a confession that spares further pain. He chooses to confront Vance one last time Arranging a meeting through Jap under the guise of a plea deal that Vance's manner that evening, Poirot presents the locket key, watching the tycoon's face pale. "You have woven a paradox, monsieur," Poirot says, "where every confession conceals another. This contract ends it." Vance, cornered, agrees to confess to the sabotage in exchange for a private trial, sparing the Beaumont's name. Poirot, though reluctant, accepts, prioritizing mercy over spectacle. As he leaves, the weight of justice feels bittersweet. The paradox resolved, but at a cost. One final twist awaits, a shadow from the past ready to challenge his choice. Stay tuned for Chapter 10, where Poirot unveils the last secret and closes the case with a surprising act of compassion. Chapter 10, The Final Revelation. The London sky is a tapestry of gray and gold as Hercule Poirot sits in his Whitehaven Mansion's apartment. The locket key from Clara Henshaw gleaming on his desk beside the scattered documents of the confession. Paradox. The case has unraveled a decade of deceit. Sir Roland Vance's orchestration of Lord Beaumont's death, Henry Caldwell's sabotage, Victor Beaumont's vengeful forgeries, Margaret Finch's silent witness, and Clara's hidden contract. Each confession, a paradox of truth and lies, has led to this moment. Poirot's agreement with Vance for a private confession spares the Beaumont family public ruin, but his gray cells hum with unease. The Griffin-creased warning, the Griffin, strikes again, and Caldwell's cryptic mention of a final player suggests one last secret. A shadow yet to step into the light. Determined to close the case, Poirot sets out for a final confrontation. Not with Vance, but with the elusive figure who has orchestrated the paradox's deepest layer. Poirot's first stop is the Citibank, where the safe deposit box holds the contract proving Vance's guilt. Armed with Clara's key, he gains access, the bank's marble halls echoing with the weight of finality. The box yields a single document, a contract dated weeks before Beaumont's death, signed by Vance Caldwell, and Clara, detailing the sabotage of the yacht's engine to disrupt a trade deal. But a handwritten note tucked inside shocks Poirot. It's from Lord Beaumont himself, addressed to his lawyer, hinting he suspected Vance's treachery and planned to confront him. The note, never delivered, suggests Beaumont's death was no accident but a desperate act to silence his accusations. Poirot's mind races. Someone ensured this note stayed hidden, manipulating the confessions to keep the focus on Thorpe. The final player must be someone close to the original scandal. With access to Beaumont's private papers, returning to Scotland Yard, Poirot confers with Inspector Japp, who reports a new lead. A retired solicitor, Mr. Edward Langley, has come forward after hearing of Victor's arrest. Langley, who handled Beaumont's estate alongside Thorpe and Caldwell, claims to have evidence that could end the lies. Poirot meets Langley at a quiet tea shop in Bloomsbury, the elderly man's hands trembling as he produces a sealed envelope. "I kept this hidden for years," Langley says, his voice heavy with guilt. The envelope contains a second copy of Beaumont's note, along with a ledger page showing payments from Vance to an unknown account days before the accident. Langley confesses he was the final player, a silent partner in Vance's scheme. He didn't sabotage the yacht, but facilitated payments to Caldwell, believing it was mere business espionage. When Beaumont died, Langley buried the evidence, fearing ruin, and later fed Victor information to fuel his vendetta against Thorpe. Hoping to deflect suspicion from himself, Poirot's eyes gleam as the paradox unravels completely. Langley crafted the Griffin-creased warning to Margaret, using Vance's company's stationery to intimidate her, ensuring her silence while Caldwell's forgeries kept Thorpe in the crosshairs. The confessions, Victor's, Caldwell's, in the crypt document were layers of misdirection, each designed to obscure Langley's role as the keeper of the true secret. Beaumont's suspicion of Vance, documented and suppressed. Langley's guilt drove him to manipulate Victor's revenge, creating a paradox where every confession pointed to Thorpe's guilt while shielding the deeper truth of Vance and Langley's conspiracy. "You, Monsieur Poirot," says, his voice calm but piercing, "created a maze of lies to hide your own shadow." Langley breaks down, admitting he sent the anonymous letter to Thorpe that started it all. hoping to force a public confession that would absolve his own conscience without exposing him. Poirot escorts Langley to Scotland Yard. Confesses, providing the ledger and note as evidence. Japp, astounded by the case's complexity, prepares charges against Vance, Caldwell, and Langley. Ensuring the private trial, Poirot negotiated to protect Lady Beatrice and Victor. Nadia Kovacs, cleared of deeper involvement, is released with a warning, while Margaret Finch, under protection, agrees to testify. Back at his apartment, Poirot gathers all parties. Thorpe, Lady Beatrice, Victor released on bail, Clara, and Margaret for a final reckoning in his drawing room. He lays out the truth. Beaumont's death was a murder born of greed, orchestrated by Vance, executed by Caldwell, and concealed by Langley. Thorpe, though guilty of minor financial misdeeds, was innocent of the murder, a scapegoat and a paradox designed to torment. The confessions, Poirot explains, were a chain of half-truths, each reflecting the guilt of its creator Victor's rage, Caldwell's remorse, Langley's fear. Lady Beatrice weeps, her family's pain laid bare, but thanks Poirot for sparing them public disgrace. Victor, subdued, vows to rebuild his life, while Thorpe, shaken but relieved, offers a heartfelt apology for his past errors. Clara and Margaret, freed from their burdens, leave with quiet gratitude. As the group disperses, Poirot stands alone, gazing out at the London skyline. The paradox, a tangle of confessions where truth and lies intertwined, is resolved through compassion as much as logic. He allows Vance's private confession to stand, ensuring justice without spectacle, a choice that balances his moral scales. Pouring a final tisane, Poirot reflects on the case's lesson. Truth, like a confession, can be a weapon or a salve, depending on how it's wielded. The Griffin's shadow fades, and London sleeps under a clearer sky. The case is closed, but Poirot's work, as always, awaits the next mystery. Thank you for following this tale, dear viewers. Hit that like button, subscribe, and comment below with your thoughts on Poirot's latest triumph. Until next time, keep your gray cells sharp.